morning, children. Today I will be taking up French Revolution history, first chapter. That's the first chapter for you. Today we will be discussing about French Revolution. Okay. Why did this revolution take place in France? Where is it? Exactly is France. France is located in the European continent. We all know that France is in Europe. So what happened in the 18th century, in the late 18th century? How was France during that period? What was the society during that period? Okay, what did it consist of? Who were the people who constituted? Okay, now the first aspect deals with how the French society was during the late 18th century. Then we go on to discuss about the growth of middle class. Then what were the reasons for the French Revolution to take place? When does a revolution take place? The people are unhappy. So what are the reasons? What are the chain of events which took place, which led to this revolution in France? Then how monarchical form of government, absolute monarchy, was abolished in France and people wanted a constitutional republic. So how did this transition take place from absolute monarchical form of government to the constitutional republic? How France became a constitutional republic? Then what was the role of directory? Then what was the role of women in the French Revolution? Then you will see how slavery was abolished and what are the changes this revolution brought about in the everyday lives of the French people. It's a very interesting lesson, children. We can see how the French Revolution has left a legacy behind, the legacy of liberty and equality. So these ideals are there even in our preamble. It is a role model for many European countries. This French Revolution, you will see in your 10th class when we discuss about nationalism in Europe, how it inspired thinkers all over Europe. Those days we used to have kingdoms. Nowadays, now you see so many independent nations. This was not how in the 18th century. You had many kingdoms like the Ottoman Empire. How these empires disintegrated, how these kingdoms broke up and they became independent nations. Now today our study will be about the French society. Before I move on to the French society, let us see, he introduces with what happened on a particular day, 14th July 1789. What exactly happened in France on that day? Let us see. On the morning of 14th July 1789, the city of Paris was in a state of alarm. So there was some sort of impending danger. What is this alarm? Some danger was lurking around. What was this danger? The king had commanded the troops to move into the city. Why did the king ask the army to move in? There were rumors that he would soon order the army to open fire upon the citizens. Why did the king ask for opening an order? Okay, why did he order the army to open fire? Now, what exactly happened on the day? Let us see. Some 7,000 men and women, they gathered in front of the town hall. They decided to form a people's militia. What do you mean by militia? It is a military force that is raised from civil population to supplement a regular army in an emergency. Now these people, they decided to fight back. Why? They broke into a number of government buildings in search of arms. The king had ordered the troops to come in. So these people were searching for these arms. Finally, a group of several hundred people, they marched towards the eastern part of France. Okay, they stormed the fortress prison, the Bastille. Now this Bastille was a fort. This fort was hated by the people of French. Why was it hated? Because it represented the tyrannical rule of the French Emperor Louis XVI. See, his rule was an oppressive rule. So people were not happy with the way they ruled. Now what did they do? Let us see. What did they do? They stormed the fortress prison Bastille, where they hoped to find hoarded ammunition. Ammunition consists of what? Bullets and shells. Now, in the armed fight that followed, the commander of Bastille was killed and the prisoners were released. How many prisoners were there? There were hardly 7 of them. Yet, the Bastille was hated by all. Why was it hated by all? Because it stood for the despotic power of the king. It represented something which people didn't like. The way the king ruled the people of France. Now the fortress was demolished. They vented out their anger by demolishing it. and its stone fragments they were sold in the market, and what people did, some of them they kept it as a reminder of its destruction. They poured out there and they vented out their anger by demolishing the fortress because it represented the tyrannical rule of the French emperor. Now, the days that followed saw more rioting, people in a very violent mood to destroy everything, okay, both in Paris as well as in the countryside. What was the reason? Because of the high price of bread. Now let us see, much later when historians look back on this time, they saw it as the beginning of a chain of events that led to the execution of the king in France. So it started with storming this fortress in Bastille. Afterwards, a chain of events led to the execution of the King Louis XVI. So now let us see how, before we go on to read about the execution of the king, let us see how the French society was. Okay, what did it consist of? The people were divided into three parts. One is the clergy. It consisted of three estates. The first estate, the second estate, and the third estate. The first estate consisted of clergy. These people, they were vested with the power to work in the church. So these people who belonged to the clergy, they had privileges by birth. Okay, and then the second estate, you had the nobility. The third estate consisted of big businessmen, rich merchants, etc. So now, moving on, you can see a picture of the figure 1, the storming of Bastille. Okay, this is the picture you can look into. Now, moving on to the French society during the late 18th century. Now, who ruled France? Let us see at that time. In 1774. In 1774, Louis XVI, he belonged to which family? He belonged to the Bourbon family of kings. He ascended the throne of France. That is, he became the king of France in the year 1774. What is the name of the king? Louis XVI. Now, how old was he? He was 20 years old and he was married to the Austrian princess Mary Antoinette. What is the princess' name? She belonged to Austria and her name was Mary Antoinette. Now, when he became the king, he found an empty treasury. Means there was no money in the treasury. Why was it empty? The reason was long years of war, then luxurious way of living, and money was spent for regular expenses. Now, let us see one by one. Long years of war had drained the financial resources of France. So, what is this long years of war? See, under Louis XVI, France held the 13 colonies of America to gain their independence from the common enemy Britain. So, America wanted to gain independence from Britain. Who helped? France helped it. How? By providing money. Now, the war added $1 billion livres to a debt that had already risen to more than 2 billion livres. Now, what happened? Lenders overgave credit to the king. Now, they started asking back for their money. Now, they began to charge 10% interest on loans. So, the French government was obliged to spend an increasing percentage of its budget on interest payments alone. So, it had borrowed money for waging this wars and they had to pay back interest to the lenders. That is on one side. Secondly, this, what is it here? Adding to this, the cost was maintaining an extravagant court at the immense palace of Versailles. So, where did the king live? In the palace. Where was it? Palace at Versailles. Now, not only this, to meet its regular expenses such as the cost of maintaining the army, the court, the running of government offices and or universities, the state was forced to increase taxes. Now, who were burdened? The people were burdened. Yet, even this measure would not have sufficed. French society in the 18th century was divided into these three estates we were speaking about. The first estate I told you, it consisted of clergy. Who are these people who belong to this clergy? They are all those people who looked after the religious duties in the Christian church. Now, nobility consists of the king's family members, all those who belong to the noble class. Then the third, now these two estates, the people belonging to the clergy and the nobility, they enjoyed privileges by birth. They were exempted from paying tax. They did not have to pay tax. It was only the third estate, which consisted of the big businessmen, the rich merchants, the court officials, the lawyers, peasants and artisans, small peasants and landless laborers. Now these people, they constituted the 90% of the population. Now these people, they had to pay the tax to the government. Now we told under Louis XVI, he wanted to increase the tax because lenders were asking for the money. Now at this time, what happened was, these people, now I told you, the people belonging to the first estate and the second estate, they did not have to pay tax, whereas these people had to pay tax. Now what was the old regime? Let us see. The society of estates was part of the feudal system. This feudal system existed in the Middle Ages. Now this old regime is used to describe all the society and the institution of France before 1789. Okay, that was how the society was at that period of time. Now, peasants made up to 90% of the population. However, only a small number of them, they owned the land which they cultivated. About 60% of the land. The 60% of the land was owned by people belonging to clergy, nobility and rich persons. Okay, now, and rich members of the third estate. The members of the first two estates, they enjoyed privileges by birth. And the nobles further, they enjoyed feudal privileges. What is this feudal privileges? These included feudal dues which were extracted from the small peasants. These peasants, they had to work for the feudal lords. And they also had to pay tax. They also had to offer their services to the feudal lords. They had to work in his house, they had to work in his fields, they had to serve in the army, and they had to participate in the building of roads. The church also levied its share of tax. What was it called? It was called pite. This was collected from the peasants. And one more tax the people had to pay. They had to pay directly to the state. That tax was called as tithe. Now these two taxes, the third estate people had to pay. And these two, the people belonging to the first estate and second estate, they did not have to pay because they were exempted, because they had privileges by birth. Whereas these people, they had to pay the major portion of the tax. Now, a number of indirect taxes was also levied on articles of daily consumption. What about it? Like salt or tobacco, the burden of financing activities of the state through taxes was borne by the third estate alone. Now this was how the society during the late 18th century in France. So what were the hardships faced by the peasants? That is what we will be seeing. Now the next aspect what we are going to discuss is the struggle to survive. Before that, there is a picture for you over here. Here the picture, there is an engraving. It shows the spider and the fly. Now the spider represents the noble people and the person is the peasant. So just like the spider, the nobles in the 18th century of France, they lived on the labor of the peasants. They turned a blind eye to the hardships faced by the peasants. Now, what exactly happened? Why were the people struggling to survive? The population of France, one of the reasons is the population of France rose from 23 million in 1715 to 28 million in 1789. Now, when the population increases, what happens? There will be increase in food grains also. People need more food grains. Now, production of food grains could not keep pace with the demand. So, the price of bread, which was the staple food for the people of France, it rose rapidly. And the workers, how they were paid? They were employed as laborers in workshop and their wages were fixed. So, what happened? On one side, you had shortage of food grains. There was shortage of food grains due to what? Because of bad harvest. In the year 1788 and 1789, crops failed for 2 years, and whatever crops were there, they had low yields. That caused a grain shortage. Now on one side there was shortage of grains, on one side the population was increasing and the prices of the food grains were also rose. Now the wages did not keep pace with the rise in prices. Then what happened? The gap between the poor and the rich got widened. Then things became worse when drought or hail reduced the harvest. This led to subsistence crisis, something that occurred very frequently in France during the old regime. So if you see the next picture, figure 4, he gives you how a subsistence crisis happens. What happens when a bad harvest happens? See, he has given you the clues. Now you have to fill it up. So bad harvest, it leads to scarcity of grains. When there is scarcity of grains, what happens? There will be rise in prices. Then the poor can no longer buy the bread. So what happens? It leads to weaker bodies. They are not able to eat sufficiently and then people may fight for food. Riots may occur regarding purchase of food. Now this may lead to epidemics and it may lead to what? The increased number of deaths. That is how the subsistence. Now what happened? Many times in the old regime, this type of subsistence crisis happened. Now in the past, the peasants and the workers, they participated in the revolts against the increase of taxes and food scarcity. But whenever they participated, it was not on a large scale, it was only on a small scale. Now, they lacked the means and programs, they did not have proper guidance as to how to go about on a full-scale measure that would bring a change in the social and economic order. Because only the third estate had to bear the entire burden of paying the tax. So, from what happened, at that time, the middle class was emerging. What constituted the middle class? Let us see. The 18th century, now this was left to those groups within the third estate who had become prosperous and had access to education and new ideas. The 18th century witnessed the emergence of social groups called the middle class. The second aspect we are looking into now. Now, what did they do? These merchants, they earned their wealth through an expanding overseas trade and from the manufacture of goods of what? Woolen and silk textiles. They were either exported or they were bought by the richer members of the society. These people, in addition to the merchants and the manufacturers, the third estate included professionals such as the lawyers or administrative officials. Now these people were educated and they believed that no society should be privileged by, but they did not believe in a society where people should be treated equally. They should not have privileges by birth. They wanted to do away with this privileges by birth. Okay, a person's social position must depend on his merit. These ideas envisaged a society based on freedom and equal laws. So the thought of having equality slowly started emerging. And opportunities for all, these were put forward by philosophers. We have three main philosophers, children. One is John Locke. So these people wrote books and they expressed their views in these books. One is John Locke. The second one is Jean-Jacques Rousseau. What are the books I'll be writing over here? Third one is Montesquieu. John Locke, he wrote the two treatises of government. And Jean-Jacques Rousseau, he wrote the social contract. Montesquieu, he wrote the spirit of laws. Now these philosophers, what ideas did they put forth? Let us see. Now Jean Locke, in his book, what did he do? In his two treatises of government, he disproved the fact, he sought to disprove the fact that the doctrine of divine and absolute right of the monarch. See, absolute monarchical form of government, it vested all the powers in the hands of the king. Now, they didn't want the ruler should be sympathetic towards the needs of the citizens. So if he rules in an oppressive way, people will definitely feel unhappy. Now, what did Rousseau do? He carried this idea forward. Okay, he proposed a form of government based on social contract. Now, contract can be written or oral. Now, between people and their representatives. For example, we have representative democracy. So, we elect our rulers. So, the constitution has given us that freedom. So, in the spirit power of the government between the legislative, the executive and the judiciary. Whatever government we have, what are the three main organs of our government? The legislative, executive and judiciary. Similarly, Montesquieu also proposed for a government with division of powers between these three organs. Now this model of government was put into force in the USA. When it was put into force, when the 13 colonies, they declared their independence from Britain. The American Constitution and its guarantee of individual rights, it served as an example for the political thinkers in France. Now these ideas of these philosophers, they were discussed by the people. Where were they discussed? It was discussed in the saloons and in the coffee houses. So people started discussing about, see what happened in America, why can't it happen in France? Now slowly it spread among the people through books and newspapers. When education started spreading, slowly people got to know exactly what's happening in the other parts of the world. Now these were frequently read aloud in the groups for the benefit of those who could not read and write. The news that Louis XVI, he planned to impose further taxes to be able to meet the expense of the state government, it generated anger and protest against the system of privileges. People were not happy with these two estates who enjoyed privileges by birth. So, in the next module we will see how this French Revolution occurred. Okay, how did this outbreak of revolution happen? How this monarchy was abolished and France becomes a constitutional republic. To have a quick recapitulation, children, today we discussed about how the French society was during the late 18th century. We discussed about the subsistence crisis and we discussed about the growing middle class and the thoughts of these philosophers. Thank you, children.